Welcome to Emotional Sobriety, the next step in recovery, with Dr. Allen Berger and Tom Rutledge.
I haven't seen you forever, either.
I know.
Of you. Yeah.
You look really good, Roger.
Yeah, I keep being told that, and my response is invariably appearances can be deceiving. But and thank you. I do appreciate it.
I got that when there was a certain weight loss place I got to with my treatment, and everybody was complimenting me. I'm going like, I don't feel that good.
My energy level is still very up and down, but delighted to be here.
There was a guy sharing at our meeting the other night, my home group, and he was talking about intrinsic value, and he was talking about whether we're fat, thin, whether we've got a lot in the bank or a little bit in the bank. The world's sending us signals to validate us about what we have or what we don't have. Values imposed on us by external forces, but that what he's been nurturing is, this intrinsic value that he believes that we all have that's decoupled from this stimuli that we're getting that comes from a bunch of sources. It shouldn't matter because we all have intrinsic value, and then it doesn't, this is just a shell.
The getting from here to there is where all the action is, right? That's where all the action is okay. Ideally, in an ideal world, it wouldn't matter. I don't completely agree with that, by the way, Patrick, and I'll tell you why. And is it okay to just continue on that theme?
Yeah, let's just keep going.
Now? I think part of being human is to be impacted by our experiences, and that very much includes being impacted by situations, especially by other people. It's a very complex issue because so much in emotional sobriety, we talk about the importance of not being as impacted by situations, events, other people's opinions of us, and so on. And that's a really important and powerful idea. But I think a lot in terms of balance. And that's really an important idea for those of us who are too impacted, who don't know how to have a sense of who we are and what our values are and what we feel and what matters to us, and have trouble asserting ourselves and knowing what we want and asking for what we want. And all that stuff we talk about is so important in terms of self-awareness and self-assertiveness, both in emotional sobriety. But yet I also always want to give voice to the other side, which is it's possible to be so concerned with that self-definition and that self-experience that we cut ourselves off from receiving from the world. And we need to receive at every level: physiological, psychological, emotional, spiritual. So I don't get totally on board with we're not supposed to be impacted that much by what happens to us. To me, or what's going on around us. And, even Fritz Perls, the primary founder of Gestalt Therapy, who was, believe me, really into self-expression and self-responsibility and your right to be you in this world. But he even said, the goal is to let ourselves be controlled by the situation we're in. And Alan's mentioned that before, I think, at the Thursday night meeting, which seems totally contradictory to almost
Wait, letting ourselves be controlled by the situation? You'll have to clarify.
What he means is, if we're going to be effective in the world, to be aware of context in our responses to the world. So controlled is too strong of a word. I'm not sure that's the exact word that Pearl's used. I think it is the word that Allen uses sometimes. But even he, with his great emphasis on the importance of the self and self-affirmation and self-expression, he was also very aware of the importance of context. So I'm aware right away of wanting to interject my notion of balance as a very useful notion to me when we talk about all kinds of concepts in emotional sobriety, as well as the idea that anything I say today, I think anything we say in a group context, and Tom, I know this is a big theme of yours, may or may not fit at all for a given person who's listening to this podcast or who's at the emotional sobriety meeting on Thursday nights, because we are each different. And in terms of each of us finding our own voice in the world and taking in information that is helpful to us, it's really important that direction or advice in a general way that we give about emotional sobriety or any subject related to psychotherapy or personal growth or spiritual growth. It's very important, I think, for the listener to look at, okay, sounds good. How does that fit for me? I'm a very emotional guy, and that's probably the root of it. I spent the first 20 years of my working life doing body work, doing work that was very concerned with helping people learn about the connection between what they're experiencing, especially emotionally experiencing in their life, and what's going on in their body with their breathing, with their posture, with their muscle tension, with ways that they are physically, we, not they, we are physically tightening to reduce the intensity of feelings that are trying to arise within us, that are trying to flow upward to our consciousness. And we learn to do that in our families. We learn which feelings are okay and which feelings are not okay very early on in our family. And then, because we need love and a sense of belonging so much, we start to mold ourselves, and literally physically, but very much psychologically, in the direction of those messages that we're trying to internalize. So that's my long-winded way of getting around to answering your question, Patrick, which is, if we're not able to receive, and I don't really think of it as imprinting, although that certainly does involve receiving, all of our basic emotional needs, not to mention our physiological needs in terms of oxygen and food, are going to be unmet. We need to be able to receive to be in balance with other people, with the world, in our life. So it's very, very important for us to cultivate an ability to be receptive, not just an ability to be expressive. In our culture, we pay attention almost exclusively to the doing.
It's all about the serenity prayer. The truth is, we do influence our environment and we influence each other all the time. We do it professionally. It's like, but we do it by changing from the inside out, by what we do. If you know the mistake that Richard Bandler says, I love this line, is that there's no such thing as resistant clients. There are only inflexible therapists. It's like the idea, because the idea is what we're tempted to do when somebody's not whether it be therapy or elsewhere, not acting the way we want them to. I need to stop caring about that, I think. But it's like, what I want to do is I want to interact with my environment in a more effective way. And basically, when I'm trying to change the things I cannot change, and we don't control much, we control our mind, our interpretation, and how we respond. When I'm trying to change other things, I'm beating my head on a brick wall. It's wasted energy. So it's this. So I mean, this may be a stretch, but to change that does not mean I no longer, I just ignore the wall, because the wall is my experience. There it is. What am I doing? I mean, that's what we do as addicts. We beat our heads on the wall of addiction until we finally realize, that we're really bloody and we're not going to be able to push through that thing. And so what do we do with that? We don't just ignore our addiction. We change our whole relationship with addiction. In fact, addiction becomes our greatest teacher.
My ex-girlfriend is homeless, and I've been trying to help her, and it is a very painful thing that this person that I love is really struggling, and I'm trying to marshal the resources I can, and I have been for over the weeks and months, to help her out with her situation. And then this business now, with the deportations and people getting disappeared and sent to a gulag to be tortured. I feel a sense of personal injury when I see that. And now addressing both of these grievances that I have, I'm not going to just decide to stop caring about them. That's not an option, or that's not one that I'm, making myself available to.
And one of the things that Roger's saying, and I agree with, is we need to get that part clear. Sorry to interrupt you, but we are not asking, we are not suggesting that being healthier is caring less.
I need to have a different relationship with those grievances, and I need to find a way to be more effective in my relation to them, and in my parsing which I can't change and that which I have the ability to. And that's emotional sobriety is somewhere in there.
Yeah, because not being impacted by that would mean about your girlfriend being homeless, for instance. It's like, if you're not impacted by that, it's like, what good are you? Like, I wouldn't want to be the person who doesn't care. If we do nothing else today, let's make that real clear about what we're doing on the pursuit of the emotional sobriety practice. Is it's not about doing less, it's about doing different.
I know Allen is not saying, I'm not saying, none of us have been saying other people aren't supposed to matter, that the world is not supposed to matter. I brought that up initially because I'm afraid some people receive some of the messaging around emotional sobriety in that way, that we're not supposed to be impacted. The important issue, the way I frame it, is very much what you said, and you as well, Thom, and you as well, Patrick. We have reactions, we have responses. We have one degree of centeredness and groundedness within ourselves or another at any given moment. And those are constantly changing for me. And I think for most of us, we can eventually build a more enduring sense of self, I think, and a more enduring sense of inner stability as we get clearer about our values and, what we stand for and all that stuff. But my sense of that has some measure of, change to it, some measure of flexibility to it, depending on my situation. Where I would say it a little differently, Thom, is often I don't think we choose our reactions initially, especially our emotional reactions to all kinds of things that happen to us in the world and all kinds of things people say to do.
No,
to us.
because part of our response is responding to our emotions, because we're not in charge of which shows up first. They just are there.
That's the piece I wanted to say. A huge number of our emotional and intellectual thought, cognitive reactions during the day are reflective of our earlier experiences in our lives, of our programming. And so the most useful idea from both psychological orientation and a spiritual orientation that I have found to give us more choice as we talk about it, to be able to respond more effectively to our own reactions, to our own initial reactions, is learning how to pause. Because without that, for me, I am so imprisoned by my programming, by my emotional reactions, by my beliefs about myself, especially feelings and beliefs that were formed early in my life, because they tend to continue to have a lot of power for most of us, until I learn in specific situations and with my most enduring patterns, like if I'm criticized, I feel really hurt, or if I feel, well, I guess it's the same thing. If I feel attacked or criticized, I get really angry, or I pull away and react very passively and defensively, depending on which one of those might be my pattern. It can take a long time and a concerted intention and practice to learn how to pause in the face of especially our intense emotional reactions. And so I think it's worth making a big deal out of that, because that is the space, to me, where we begin to have some choice, where we begin to have some other options besides our deeply ingrained habitual internal reactions and behavioral and verbal reactions in tons of situations in our lives. And those are what tend to keep us so stuck, and in moments of introspection, so frustrated and so unhappy, are those enduring, unhelpful, or very painful to ourselves and others emotional responses. So that's in talking about emotional sobriety, especially in the emotional part, because again, that's where I focus so much of my work with clients, or have and still do over the years. That skill, because it is a skill, of learning to stop. A lot of people, it helps to learn to breathe as part of that, to take several slow, conscious breaths. For other people, it's learning, if possible, if it's appropriate at all, to exit the situation that we're in for a few minutes, maybe. To what? To restore ourselves to sanity, right? To regain our emotional center of gravity, our emotional balance.
Always reserve the right to disagree with yourself. It's like this what you're describing is one of those places where understanding our consciousness is multiple is really helpful.
Feel free to disagree with ourselves. Feel free to disagree with or challenge or
Oh, we do it all, and we do it all the time. I mean, I don't get a
yeah.
unanimous vote on where to go to dinner, because there's always that guy who wants to go to Mexican food, no matter what.
Something we share. Another thing we share.
This goes to what Alan's always talking about in terms of differentiation, which is there's the initial emotional reaction that comes in on impulse. And the key to living emotionally sober is to not live and express in that moment, but instead to live and express in that following moment from a more considered place.
But again, it's all context dependent. It's all who that person is dependent. And it's very much timing dependent, because very often I won't give attention to that piece yet with somebody. I'll be much more focused on helping them learn how to allow themselves simply to feel the pain or the anger or the fear or the longing that we learn in the course of our development to suppress so strongly. And for most of us, by the time we reach adulthood, the range and the depth of our emotional experience is tremendously limited compared to the liveliness and expressiveness and so on that we had in our younger years. And there's some wisdom in that. We have the ability to be more reflective and more contained and more thoughtful and hopefully wiser, at any given moment. But for many of us, again, as Thom said, this is complicated stuff, because it's very personal, very subjective. So learning emotional self-regulation, which is another term we used to talk about, or emotion management is another term, is part of the process, but also just learning to feel. I've worked with men and women, but particularly men, who, no matter how sad they've been, they haven't cried for decades, haven't shed a tear. Maybe at a movie when nobody wasn't looking, if a scene really got to them, or if they're reading something in a novel that really impacts them. We have such powerful ideas in our culture about which emotions are okay, and a lot of those are sexually stereotyped, right? Which emotions are okay to feel. And again, we set about instituting those rules into our own being, into our own behavior. So a lot of my work is focused on helping people become able to feel again. And that work is centered on a gentle kind of acceptance and awareness of where that part of us comes from that needed to say no to a lot of our emotional experience, and developing more compassion and understanding and awareness around that. First and foremost, that's where the process begins. And then little by little, learning how to allow more feeling. And I don't mean crying or I've had people, I don't do this kind of work so much anymore, but an old wooden tennis racket I had in my office that I had people pound the crap out of a big pillow with. That can be a little bit of it sometimes, but what I'm talking about more is an inside out process that's generally much more gradual than that, in terms of learning how to allow emotional experience to deepen and extend within us. One more thought, Tom. I mentioned When I mentioned pausing, there are lots of ways to go about trying to create that space. Another couple of ways are, we can become aware enough where we can just express, if there's another person in the situation, what's going on for us. If we trust them enough and we trust ourselves enough in terms of self-support, if they don't react in the way we're hoping they will, right? To say it, if that's a big caveat, if we feel safe enough to do that, to just express what's going on for us. Wow, I really feel like, I feel like getting all hot again, right? And I feel like my face is getting off flesh, and my fists want to, I want to form fists, and I'm getting really angry. Um, that's one thing we can do, is we can just report. But the process of learning how to create that pause, it's so important to learn to start with smaller situations that don't challenge us as much, that don't trigger emotions that are as intense and as powerful, and where we feel instantly like that feeling is all that I am. My anger that I'm feeling right now, or my fear, is absolutely all of who I am. The practice points, and it's a learned skill. We need practice, and it's wise to start with smaller situations that only annoy us a little bit, or only cause us a little bit of anxiety, and then we start with those, watching our reaction, choosing not to react. Or if I tend to be passive and I withdraw, saying a little bit where I wouldn't ordinarily say anything. So thank you for giving me time to say that.
Well, yeah, but that was more than one thing. It's like, I just want to make that point. It's no, it's you opened up a
I am dutifully shamed. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's no, hell no. Dee always says that no matter what I'm talking about, she's right. She says I will interject the phrase, no matter what I'm talking about, I'll say two things, and then I just talk. It's like she says, there's never two things. It's like you couldn't even count them, whatever there is. But she says you always two things. Okay, all right, got it. So you're not alone with that. But you opened up a new trail over here that I want to go down a minute, because it's one of my favorite subjects, and I think one of yours and my favorite subjects probably to talk about, not just doing therapy. It's you use, and I don't remember the exact content of what we were saying, but when you said, well, when Patrick was talking about how to respond, you said, well, I might do that, might not, and one of the things you said is I might not, and you may not have meant this, but I think it did. I might not basically attend to that thing right then. I might go someplace else. It's like, what that brought me home to is how much of our work is with emotional stuff has to do with what I think of as subtle guidance or subtle nudging. It's leading, but it's done, it is influence, not pushing. And very often it's basically a route that it doesn't it can happen didactically, but a lot of times we grow more without it being more experiential, and that is rethinking, just rethinking what problems are. You talked about sadness. I have a client right now who's very sad, and she's opened up to, I mean, a lot of horrible things in her life. She's opened up in the last few years to things that she never was able to acknowledge before. She has lots to be sad about, but she's still, in my opinion, I'm talking about my perception, is like, she still mistakenly thinks that being sad is a problem. Okay, because that's what we learned. That's what she learned in a big way. That having feel any feeling is a problem. And so when you said that, one of the things I was thinking about is sometimes how I respond to her when she says she sends me a text. Sometimes she say I'm very sad, and I'll say. Yeah, that's tough sometimes. It's like, or something like, and ask her about another feeling. It's like the idea is that we're often trying to solve the problems that aren't problems. And yeah, yeah, and so the idea, because what you're saying is exactly what I'm doing with this young woman, which is no, I want you to become more comfortable with all of those feelings, and even the feelings that this one a big pet peeve of mine is people quit using the term negative feelings. There's no fucks thinking there's a negative feeling. It's like there are it's what we do with them, but some feelings are very hard, but it's like no, it's okay. You need to be able to you need to have tolerance, openness, and ability to relate to all of these feelings. And I guess that's probably more I want to say. What you opened up for me was the idea that it's one of my. Well, I'll just say this for you and I, Roger. That one of my favorite things in therapy is that part where we get to make these judgment calls, these decisions as we go along, because there's so much stuff out there.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask, and I just think this episode's a good opportunity. Is you both had some health struggles over the last year or so, and I wanted to know if there were things about emotional sobriety you discovered in your grappling with your body's fighting you and things that were outside of your control.
First of all, yes. The answer is yes. It's like I learned a lot and very different. What did I learn? And I talked about this on the podcast when I first finished treatment, came back to the podcast. It's like, it's a wonderful lesson in humility. It's like I went into this thing with the best attitude there was, and I had people writing me and saying to me, God, your attitude going into this cancer treatment is you're my role model. You're the one I'm going to do that. And so one of the things I did when I came back is I wanted everybody to know this is not an exaggeration. I lost all of it. It's like, there was not an ounce of positivity in me at times in dealing with this stuff. The bottom fell out of that stuff, and it was like it was just a really good. I mean, I didn't know it was a horrible experience, but it was like, from hindsight, a wonderful experience of humility, which we can, Roger and I talk about a lot. You can never get too much of. It's like, and apparently we're going to keep getting lessons in it. It's like, but that was a very powerful lesson. That it's like it didn't matter because I was actually talk about interfacing with the environment. It was not okay. I was not okay with continuing to listen to people tell me about what a role model I was for them for doing that, because I didn't do well. It's like I believed in the things I was saying about how I wanted to do it, how I wanted to approach it, but I did not do it. I was not successful in what I was saying, and I felt so much better. And that's emotional sobriety too. I felt so much better about myself when I just cleared the air and said, "Let me explain to you how much I fucked this up." It's like it was not pretty. It's like and the cool part about that with our community, I didn't hear one negative thing out of anybody. People they wrote me some positive things. It was just different. They weren't saying, "Oh, you got such a great attitude." They were just going, "Okay, well, thanks for being honest."
I'm pretty sure that was just two things, Thom.
All right.
So, as far as main themes in that, so I have to interject a couple of notes before I reply personally for me. I want to point out in terms of self-acceptance, Thom, that if you had stood in powerful judgment which, if you're like me, part of you did a fair amount of the time, right? That's part of the process
Mhm.
too.
Yeah,
But if
yeah.
you had only stood in powerful judgment all the time toward those parts of you that lost it and those parts of you that weren't reacting in a
Mhm.
stereotypically emotionally sober way,
Mhm.
that would have been a huge obstacle to you being able to get honest with people about, you
Yeah.
tell me about this stuff about how you saw me, but I got to tell you, that's not what I felt I was going through. That's not what I was thinking. That's not how I was being. So I want to make that point that
Yeah.
to the extent we have powerful judgments of ourselves, and I believe we all do. I've met
Yeah.
some really highly spiritual, very enlightened people that still have a lot of judgments of themselves run through their mind on a fairly frequent basis. The difference is they don't believe those judgments anymore,
Yeah.
or at least not as much. And so the judgments don't have nearly as much power as they
Yeah.
used to. But I want to make that point about acceptance. By acceptance, we're not talking about resignation. We're not talking about passivity, not in the least. We're talking about just acknowledging in the present moment our truth, right? What's going on right now. Then we address, is it possible to change that? What can I do to change that? Do I need to enlist the assistance of others to change that? All of those questions are a second question, an important question that we ask. But it's another little point. I always fear there's a lot of misunderstanding about what acceptance of our
Oh,
emotions and
my
our
God, and
experience
there is, because I just
means.
this is my
Yeah.
opportunity to tell you
Yeah.
of all the things I've learned from you, and I believe the term is shitload of things that I've learned from you. It's your way of talking about acceptance, your way of defining acceptance, everything you've said about acceptance has 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 changed me, has changed how I see it, how I think about it. I had a positive way of thinking about acceptance before, but not nearly as powerful as what I've learned from you. That the idea that it is not, because the idea is not resignation. It's not just, oh well, I can't do anything about that, so I better stop doing it. It's like you said, and I don't know if you said this or Nathaniel Branden, you're quoting Branden, but it's like you said, acceptance is always the first step to change. And I love that. I use that. I quote you on that all the time. And I also give your name and social security number when I'm doing that.
Appreciate
It's like, so I want people to know. But it's like, and what the last piece I want to say there is, and it's an ongoing challenge to present that to people, because it is so misunderstood. When it is not, it's a simple, not easy thing. It is not an easy thing. It wasn't an easy thing for me to get to where you were talking about with that. And I don't know if I've gotten exactly where you are, but where I've gone with it. And it was, but other people just, I mean, it's hard to explain it.
Well, I wish we had a different word for it, because I'll tell you what makes it doubly hard, Thom, is when I talk about acceptance, I also mean, and you mentioned Nathaniel Branden, a famous self-esteem theorist and psychotherapist. He talked about 3 different levels of acceptance, but to talk about just 2, I also mean learning how to become a better friend to ourselves. I also mean learning self-compassion, right? But
Yeah.
that's a different way of looking at the whole concept of acceptance than this idea of acknowledging and feeling the reality of our experience and our truth in the present moment. That's the sense in which we're using it in now. So that adds additional confusion. But that's why I always pay a lot of attention to trying to.
Yeah.
Acceptance is meant to serve multiple purposes. We're using it in an unusual
Yeah.
way, and that creates a lot of confusion
I
for
want,
people.
yeah, and I just want to say one thing, just because that's fun I'd like to argue with you, but it's like, I love the word acceptance, and if you're gonna make a motion to, that we change the word, find a different word, I'm gonna vote against you, because the word is what I've noticed, it's a challenging word, because it brings you back to the present moment always. acceptance is right here. It's like, especially when you're talking about it as a step toward something else. It's like, this is fully what it is. It's like, I like the idea that it's hard for people to get their head around it because my experience is when you have to fight a little bit to learn something, you're going to hold on to it longer.
That's cool. I
Yeah.
hear that. That's cool. Thank you. So to respond to your question, Patrick, oh my gosh. I first was diagnosed with lymphoma back in December of 2020. And there was a lymphoma tumor in my neck. And I went through 6 months of chemotherapy and I think 14 or so radiation therapy treatments because the chemotherapy didn't completely eliminate the tumor. So the thing is, though, I only got chemotherapy once every 3 or 4 weeks. And I was in no pain at any time from my lymphoma, and it had not spread. So I was very aware that I had a serious life-threatening illness, and I was also aware the prognosis for the particular type of lymphoma, mantle cell is called, I had, is not terrific. But I was never in pain. And so it didn't send me into the challenges at an emotional level. It certainly brought me into an awareness of can I accept this or not, and what gets in the way of my accepting it. And I had to go through a fair amount of internal work around that. But because I wasn't in a lot of distress, and therefore the people I love and who love me weren't in a lot of distress about it for me, at an emotional level, it wasn't that much of a challenge. Then I went out of remission and had a recurrence in October of 2023. And so I was put on some oral medications and stuff because with this type of lymphoma, they don't do chemotherapy in a second round of treatment. Normally, they don't. Medications work for a while to prevent the cancer cells from reproducing and so on. But then last fall, in October and November, those other treatments had stopped working. But I was still in no physical discomfort, even though I had numerous tumors in my neck and my chest and my abdomen. They weren't quite big enough yet to be really impacting anything except my energy level and my functioning. So now the treatment I went through, called CAR T, C-A-R space T cell, CAR T cell therapy, is a fairly new treatment for blood cancers like lymphoma and some leukemias and so on. Had a little short of miraculous effect for me. Within a few weeks of going through this very, very challenging treatment, all my tumors were gone. And now 4 months later, they're still gone, which I still can't get over. I mean, it feels like such a miraculous thing through science and through research and through commitment of people who do that. So I've had a mixed feeling, Patrick, about my process, because even with this last bout, the treatment was much more distressing at a physical level in terms of what are called neurotoxic effects and other types of side effects of the treatment, and a couple of weeks of hospitalization during the treatment and so on. They take some of your own T cells out of your body in your blood, white cells, and genetically modify them and stick them back in to your body, reinfuse them, and turns them into super lymphoma cell hunter killers, is what CAR T, that's believe me, the nutshell version of CAR T therapy. But with me, at least so far, there's no way to know for how long it will last, how long it will last. So that's sobering to know, but I always try to stay grounded in that. So actually, the effectiveness of the treatment in some ways has been harder for me to handle than having the cancer, Patrick, to answer your question, than having the lymphoma.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why. I think a lot of stuff that goes on for us as human beings, we really don't know why if we look at why closely. But I felt like I was pretty able to get on board and be accepting of having lymphoma back in 2019 and 2020 and it recurring because I knew that could happen at any time. But after a couple of oral medications did not work for it, I think part of me was going like, well, there's a good chance, not within a few months, but within a year or a year and a half, this is probably going to be it, And it was hard to have a treatment that for me, and another thing that makes it hard for me to talk about this is I know people personally, and I've had clients and friends, and I know there are so many other people out there who have had a much more horrific experience with cancers of all types and who have died from cancer than I have had. And I'm always trying to be mindful of that. And I'm sure almost everybody listening knows of people who have been through or even died from a form of cancer. So I feel like I've been pretty accepting of having it, but at a certain point, I feel like well, that's all. I think kind of like parts of me that I had started to numb and resign myself with have kind of coming back to life energetically in terms of my energy level, emotionally, kind of waking up from that, Patrick. That's actually part of the treatment was really hard. Don't get me wrong. For me, it was the side effects, but I had people who loved me, who were there with me, which was a hugely important piece of it for me. My son and my ex-wife, to be specific, we're still good friends. So realizing I might be around for a while has been pretty challenging for me to receive, right? To let in and let myself experience. So I appreciate you asking that, Patrick. Thank you.
Well, the coach came up, when you least expected it or didn't expect it before, and said, "Andy's get back in the game." You go like, "I thought I was out." It's like
it feels like such a treat to be sitting here with you and to have you feeling so good and looking so good, and that clarity of thought and that just amazing passion that you always bring to these coming through even better than I remembered it. Your experience and Tom's experience just makes me think about how we all go through life taking little sips of our sense of our own mortality. And then when you're really up against the wall with cancer, you have to take gulps. You have to confront the reality, that our time on earth is limited. And how are you guys able to hang with that? Or like, are you, or like, how does one metabolize that when you're so like on the edge like that?
We are pushed in the direction of confronting it and asking those questions, Patrick, because there are every imaginable space in there, from still total denial and completely out of touch, all the way to absolute embracing of the reality of it, and the truth of mortality for every last one of us. Right? I still think there's that whole continuum is occupied by me at any given moment, right? And by so many of us. But you're right, it does give us a huge opportunity to confront mortality. And I'm still very much in the middle of that process, Patrick. I think I'm more accepting of the truth of that, less fearful of death, if you want to look at it that way, than I was with this recurrence than I was just a few months ago. But I still don't like the idea at all. And I'm not saying acceptance and liking are the same thing. They're not. We can learn to accept things that we hate, but accept that they're real. And then again, ask ourselves, can I do anything about it or not? But I'm still in the middle of that process very much, Patrick, about dealing with mortality. What about you, Tom?
Well, I mean, first of all, that's not a bad place for people our age to get pushed, because if you, to the degree that we haven't looked at it before, because we always put the caveat in there that we'll just go ahead and be morbid about that and say Patrick could die before both of us. It's like and if he goes mountain climbing, I think it's likely. It's like because he tends to fall off, but it's. So we all need to be facing that, but it's like, no, being older helps to face that. Having you and I have talked about this a lot. We've had lots of friends, basically, like a friend of mine says, we better take cover. Somebody's picking us off one by one. It's like, we've lost a lot of friends, and you can't help but feel your own mortality when you have as many good friends as we have that are no longer here. It's
Well,
like
yeah,
it's a gift. It's like
yeah,
it's a good thing, and it's like, and I love what you're saying, that basically, if you want to know how I feel about it, just check with me on any particular day, because
yeah,
it's
yeah,
or time of day, because it's going to be different at different times. But yeah, I mean, but I welcome, and I think you do too. I welcome the lessons there, and I welcome the reminders, because there's no doubt in my mind that they are. I learned this through emotional sobriety, and I learned this through the Stoicism that I study, is remaining aware, consciously aware of our mortality, is one of the ways that one of the ways that we focus on being the best versions of ourselves.
yeah.
Is knowing it's time limited, and we what do you want to do with today?
Yeah. I also want to acknowledge before we quit before we finish for today. Um, I was on the receiving end of so much love from so many people in the course of, especially this recurrence. That was very hard for me to receive. Receiving is not my strong suit. I would much rather, you know, be in the giving direction, and I'm not terrific at that a lot of the time either. But I'd much rather be in that position. So, but friends, clients, former clients, so many people were gave me so much energy and encouragement and hope, and I could talk for a very long time without naming all of them. So I just wanted, in this context, to acknowledge the importance of all the love that I received from a lot of different people
Well,
in
and
the course.
I'm gonna add to that's more is more than you would have known. So I'll make you more uncomfortable. It's like, because the people in our Thursday community were very tuned in, and they're very supportive of you, and were very concerned, and so the good news for you is you didn't have to hear from everyone individually about how loved you are. But it's like, I mean, it was very clear that, I mean, the support was everywhere. And for what it's worth, I was never with you in the same room during the time, but I tell you what, I was in contact with you. I think you did a pretty good job of being gracious in receiving all of that.
Can I share part of what I got to receive?
Yeah.
I haven't counted them, but Thom you are a dear friend, Thom. And Thom, even though we've never met in person, Thom sent me at least a couple of dozen and maybe 30 or 40 humorous cards to lift me up and cheer me up during my time in the hospital back in November. And then for 6 weeks afterwards, I couldn't go anywhere. I had to have one person with me at all times in terms of serious side effects that could show up. I just kept getting cards from this guy. They would be, they'd be birthday cards for my non-birthday. They'd be anniversary cards for a non-anniversary. They'd be, every card imaginable, incongruent, not appropriate for the occasion. Every one of them made me laugh. Every one of them brought a smile to my face. So
and that was the criteria. If the card could possibly be construed as appropriate, it didn't make the cut.
You're offering some consulting, so I just wanted to ask what you had going on right now.
Yeah, I am focusing my energies. My energy level is much better, especially early in the day and early afternoon, than it was, much better than just 3 months or 4 months ago. But so I'm focusing my energy on my work with my individual clients. I think you've posted my email address if people are interested in learning about my work. I'll give it orally as well. It's R Andes for Roger Andes, RANDESMA at AOL.com. So, yeah, I'm definitely expanding my practice again at this point in time. So, I thank you for asking, Patrick. Not doing any workshops or lectures or that kind of thing still at this point in time. I'm feeling like I need to kind of conserve my available energy for focus on my individual clients.
You know, a lot of the guys in my men's stag, my home group, listen to Ram Dass, but I'm a Roger Andes head. So I'll be sure and post links to the workshops, recordings, and then of course Roger's information. And thank you so much for doing the show on this impromptu day. You know, it's a pleasure.
Well, I hope it's obvious how much of a pleasure it's been for me to get to sit down with both of you. And thanks for the opportunity to share my thoughts, you guys. I love you both. Thank you.
I love
right.
you both. Yeah.
Love you too. Until next time.